What do you do when the very people you raised with love and kindness turn on you? It was a simple Tuesday morning, but when my son and his new wife showed up, everything I knew about my family shattered. I just finished waxing my husband's old Mustang, feeling a quiet sense of peace, when my daughter-in-law, without a word, slapped me across the face and demanded the keys to my house. The slap was just the beginning. The real shock wasn't the physical pain. It was the chilling realization that my own flesh and blood had been plotting against me. This wasn't a fight over property. This was a brutal, heart-wrenching battle for my dignity, for my legacy, for the very soul of the woman I was. They thought a piece of paper and a lawyer's cold logic would be enough to take everything I'd built. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The moment I fought back, I wasn't just defending my home. I was sending a message to anyone who ever thought they could break me. And the epic showdown that followed, filled with unexpected twists, secret documents, and a public revelation that shook our entire town, is a story you won't believe. Stay tuned, because the true ending is something they never saw coming. I remember that morning like it was yesterday. The sun glinting off the polished hood of my '68 Mustang, the one I spent a year restoring myself. I just finished a fresh coat of wax, my back a little sore, but my heart full. My neighbor, old Mr. Henderson, a man whose hands trembled more than a chihuahua in a snowstorm, shuffled over to me. "Eleanor," he rasped, his voice a dry whisper. "That car is a masterpiece. A true classic, just like its owner." I gave him a wink. He was a good old man, and the smile on his face was a better reward than any blue ribbon at a car show. That's just who I am. I try to be kind, to find the good in people, and to show them a little bit of respect. It's what my mother taught me, and it's what I tried to teach my son, Daniel. But kindness, as I've learned the hard way, is often mistaken for weakness. And that's a lesson my daughter-in-law, Jessica, was all too eager to teach me. The doorbell rang as I was wiping the last smear of wax from the chrome bumper. It was Daniel and Jessica. They weren't exactly regulars, and seeing them at my door on a Tuesday morning was as rare as seeing a bear riding a bicycle. They weren't smiling. Jessica, with her perfect blonde hair and her designer clothes, looked like she was about to announce the end of the world. Daniel, my son, my boy, stood behind her, his eyes fixed on the ground as if the polished concrete held all the answers he couldn't give me. "Mom, we need to talk," Daniel said, his voice flat, emotionless. I invited them in, my stomach already tying itself into a Gordian knot. We sat in my living room, the one I'd filled with a lifetime of memories, photos of Daniel as a baby, as a little boy, as a young man graduating college. Each picture told a story of love, of sacrifice, of a mother who gave everything she had for her son. The silence in the room was heavy, thick, with something I couldn't quite name. Jessica was the one to break it. She didn't beat around the bush. She never did. "Eleanor, we've decided that it's time for you to move out of this house." The words hit me like a physical blow. I laughed, a short, sharp bark of a sound. "What? Is this some kind of joke?" Daniel looked up, his face a mask of discomfort. "Mom, it's not a joke. We need the house. The market is crazy and we can't afford to buy our own place. This house is a good size and the location is perfect." I stared at him, my brain struggling to process what he was saying. "But this is my house. Your father and I built this house. This is my home." "It's a joint decision, Mom," Jessica interjected, her tone cold and condescending. "We've talked about this. You're retired. You don't need all this space. You can move into a small apartment, or maybe even that senior living facility we saw online." The senior living facility. My stomach churned. It was a sterile, soulless place they'd shown me a few months back, full of residents with vacant eyes and no purpose. It was a place you went to die, not to live. "Are you out of your minds?" I said, my voice rising, my disbelief turning to anger. You want to kick me out of my own home, the home where I raised you, so you can move in? The audacity. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Audacity? It's practical, Eleanor. We're thinking about the future. Our future. You've had your time. That's when it happened. She stood up, walked over to me, and with a swift, shocking motion, slapped me across the face. The sting was immediate, more shock to my mind than my skin. Before I could even react, she was holding out her hand, palm up. Give me the house keys, Eleanor. We're done talking. I couldn't believe it. My own daughter-in-law, a woman I had welcomed into our family with open arms, had just physically assaulted me in my own home. And my son, the man who was supposed to be my protector, just stood there, silently watching. He looked away, a coward hiding from the consequences of his wife's vile act. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by my own ragged breathing. I held my hand to my stinging cheek, the mark of her betrayal, a physical brand on my skin. I looked at Daniel, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger who had been molded by his wife's cold, calculating nature. My heart was shattered, a million pieces of a life I thought I knew laying in a heap on the floor. I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand an explanation. But what was there to explain? The truth was right there, in the hollow look in my son's eyes and the cruel smirk on Jessica's face. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. You know, Daniel, I said, my voice barely a whisper, there was a time when I would have done anything for you. I thought we were a family, but I was wrong. I looked at Jessica, the woman who had caused this seismic shift in my world, and as for you, you have no idea who you're dealing with. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about respect. It was about my dignity. It was about standing up for myself against the very people I had loved and trusted the most. I had to fight back, not with anger, but with something far more powerful, something they never saw coming. Just a moment. Before we continue this story, if you're finding this compelling, please consider subscribing for more stories just like this. Your support helps bring these dramas to life and expose the raw realities of family dynamics. To be continued. The next part will reveal exactly what my reaction was. You won't want to miss it. It's going to turn everything on its head.
I didn't give her the keys. I couldn't. The very thought of it was like a betrayal of my own soul. Jessica's hand was still outstretched, and a flicker of impatience crossed her face. I'm not kidding, Eleanor. Give them to me. The locks are being changed tomorrow anyway, but this is a courtesy, a last chance to make this easy on yourself. Her words were like nails on a chalkboard, a grating symphony of arrogance. I looked at Daniel, my son. I wanted to see some sign of life, a spark of the boy I'd raised. But there was nothing, just a void, an empty vessel standing beside a woman who was draining him of everything, including his humanity. It was then I realized the fight wasn't just with Jessica. It was with a silent, unseen enemy that had taken my son and twisted him into something unrecognizable. And I wasn't about to let it win. Courtesy? I scoffed, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Don't you dare talk to me about courtesy. You come into my home, a home I've poured my life into, a home my father and I built with our own hands, and you slap me? You're a guest in this house, Jessica, and a very unwelcome one at that. She took a step back, a look of pure shock on her face. She probably wasn't used to people standing up to her, and I, for one, was done with being her doormat. I wasn't some timid old lady who would just roll over and give up. I was Eleanor Vance, and this was my home, my sanctuary, the place where my late husband and I built our life together, the place where I rocked Daniel to sleep and taught him how to ride a bike. This wasn't just a house. It was a testament to everything I was, everything I believed in. My hand still tingled where she had hit me, a constant reminder of the disrespect and blatant greed I was facing. My heart was pounding, a furious drumbeat of defiance. It was a strange mix of emotions, a deep, soul-crushing sadness mixed with a fiery, righteous anger. The sadness was for my son, the boy who was lost, and the anger was for the woman who had stolen him. "Daniel, do you have nothing to say?" I asked, my voice trembling with the effort to control my emotions. "You're just going to stand there and let her do this? Let her take your mother's home?" He finally spoke, but his words were a punch to the gut. "Mom, this is for the best. We've already talked to the lawyer. You signed a quitclaim deed a few years ago, remember? When we were going through that whole estate planning thing after Dad passed? You gave me ownership." A cold, icy dread washed over me. I remembered signing some papers, a whole stack of them. Daniel had told me it was just to make sure things were in order, to prevent any legal issues in the future. I had trusted him implicitly. He was my son. I would have signed anything he put in front of me. The idea that he had used my trust against me, that he had manipulated me into giving me my home, it was a betrayal so profound it took my breath away. It was a dagger to my heart, a wound far deeper than any slap could ever inflict. You lied to me," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. All my memories, all my love, all my trust in him, it was all a lie. Jessica's face softened slightly, a chilling, triumphant smirk replacing her look of shock. "Don't call it lying, Eleanor. We call it forward thinking. And now, thanks to your, generosity, we can finally start our lives without a mortgage hanging over our heads." I couldn't look at either of them anymore. The disgust was too overwhelming. I turned and walked into my kitchen, my hands shaking as I reached for the phone. I had to call someone, not to cry, not to complain, but to fight. I needed a plan. I needed to get my life back from these vultures. I wasn't just going to let them take my home and everything I held dear. This was a battle, and I was just getting warmed up. As I held the phone to my ear, I could hear them talking in the living room, their voices hushed, their words a blurry hum of cold victory. They thought they had won. They thought they had me cornered. But what they didn't know was that they had awakened something inside me that had been dormant for a long time. They had pushed a woman who had spent her life giving, and now she was ready to take back what was hers. This isn't over. What happened next wasn't just a phone call. It was the first move in a chess match where I was about to checkmate them in the most shocking way. You don't want to miss the next chapter. Trust me, what comes next will change everything you thought you knew about me.
The cold, hard reality of the situation had finally set in. They weren't just trying to get me to move. They were trying to evict me from the home I'd owned for 40 years. And they were using a document I had blindly trusted my son with. My own flesh and blood. The betrayal was a physical ache in my chest, a deep, hollow emptiness where my love for him used to be. "Who are you calling, Mom? Your lawyer?" Daniel's voice was laced with a chilling mix of pity and condescension. "It's a done deal. You signed it. You gave me the deed to this house. There's nothing anyone can do." I turned to face them, my hands still holding the phone, but I didn't dial a number. I didn't even know what lawyer to call. My whole world was a dizzying blur of shock and rage. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stand tall, to look them both in the eye. Jessica with her smirk of victory, and Daniel with his blank stare, a mirror of his wife's calculating nature. "You're wrong," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "You're both wrong. This isn't over, not by a long shot." I hung up the phone. I wasn't going to let them see me crumble. Not now. Not ever. I walked past them, my head held high, and went into the dining room. I needed a moment, just a moment, to breathe, to think. I looked out the window at the garden, the one my husband, Tom, and I had spent so many hours tending to. He loved the roses and I loved the irises. We were a team, a partnership. And now I was alone, facing the people who were supposed to be my family. I sat at the dining table, my mind racing. What could I do? A quitclaim deed. I remembered the words. I remembered signing a mountain of paperwork. But I was grieving then, barely a year after Tom had passed. I had been a mess, relying on my son to handle all the legalities, all the paperwork. He was my only child, and I trusted him implicitly. How could I have been so foolish? How could I have let my grief blind me to the truth of who he had become? My eyes fell on a framed photograph on the mantelpiece, a picture of Daniel on his wedding day. He was smiling, a genuine, joyful smile. And Jessica was right beside him, her arm looped through his, a look of pure adoration on her face. A pang of nostalgia hit me, a wave of sadness for a time that now seemed so distant. But as I looked closer, I saw a flicker of something in Jessica's eyes, something cold and predatory. It was a look that wasn't in the wedding photos. I was just too blinded by happiness for my son to notice it back then. I stood up and went to the study, a small room at the back of the house that was filled with old books, Tom's fishing gear, and a filing cabinet. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. I knew the documents I had signed were in there somewhere. I just needed to find them. I needed to see for myself. I needed to know if there was a loophole, a way out of this nightmare. As I rummaged through the files, I could hear their voices from the living room, their laughter echoing through the house. The sound was like a dagger to my heart. They were celebrating their victory, their triumph over me. They were acting like they were already living here, deciding where to put the couch, which walls to knock down. I could hear Jessica's voice, sharp and decisive. "Oh, the kitchen needs a complete remodel, and we can turn her bedroom into a guest room. It's too big for her anyway." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not now, not ever. Tears were a sign of weakness, and I needed to be strong. I needed to fight back. I was not some helpless old lady they could simply discard. I was a fighter, and I was going to show them exactly what I was capable of. I finally found it. The folder labeled legal documents. Inside, a copy of the quitclaim deed. My signature was there, bold and clear. Below it was Daniel's. The date was right. It was all there in black and white. It was over. They had won. Or so it seemed. I closed my eyes and leaned against the cold metal of the filing cabinet, my body trembling with a mixture of grief and fury. I thought about Tom, what he would have done. He would have fought for me, and I had to fight for myself. This was my legacy. Just as a thought, if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, imagine all the other incredible dramas waiting to be told. Don't miss out on what happens next. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to get all the updates and join the community. Trust me, the real action is just getting started. I didn't let them see me break, not even for a second. The rage that had been simmering just below the surface was now a full-blown inferno, fueled by the quitclaim deed and the cold-hearted laughter I heard from the living room. I tucked the papers back into the folder, my movements precise and deliberate, and stood up straight. I was a lioness cornered, and I was about to show them my teeth. They thought they had me, but they had underestimated me in a way that was almost comical. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about the principle. It was about standing up for myself and for every woman who had ever been taken for a ride by the people she loved. I walked back into the living room, a ghost of a smile on my face. Daniel and Jessica were whispering, their heads close together, looking like two conspirators who had just pulled off the heist of the century. They looked up, startled by my presence. The smirk on Jessica's face was replaced by a look of wary suspicion. My calm demeanor was obviously not what she was expecting. "Well," I said, my voice smooth as silk, "I've had a look at the paperwork, and you're right, Daniel. It seems I did sign a quitclaim deed." I watched their faces. Jessica's smirk was returning, triumphant. Daniel looked relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. They thought they had me. They thought this was the end. But they were wrong. However, there's just one tiny little problem.
Jessica's eyes narrowed. "What problem, Eleanor?" she asked, her voice dripping with impatience. "The deed is signed. It's legally binding." "Oh, it is," I said, my smile widening. "The deed is signed, but what you two seem to have forgotten is the small matter of the other signature." Their faces went blank. "What other signature?" Daniel asked, his voice suddenly tight with confusion. "My husband's," I replied, a cold, hard finality to my voice. "This house was in both our names. It was a joint tenancy, and while I may have signed over my share, your father's share still legally belongs to me as his surviving spouse. You can't claim full ownership without his signature, which, unless you found a way to raise the dead, is a bit of a problem for you, isn't it?" I watched as the color drained from their faces. The smirk on Jessica's face vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. Daniel just stared at me, his mouth agape. The silence in the room was deafening, a stark contrast to the whispered laughter from just moments before. I felt a surge of power, a sense of vindication that was sweeter than any revenge. They had underestimated me, and now they were facing the consequences. "You're lying," Jessica finally sputtered, her voice weak. "That's not how it works." "Oh, but it is," I said, leaning in, my eyes fixed on hers. "And even if it weren't, there's another small matter of a living trust your father and I set up years ago. It states that this house is to remain in my possession until my death, at which point it will be divided equally among his heirs. That means you get a share, Daniel, but so do any future grandchildren. And the trust specifically states that the property cannot be used to pay off a mortgage. So you can have your quitclaim deed, and you can have your attorney, but you're not getting my house." The smug confidence that had defined them since they walked through my door was gone, replaced by panic. They had been so focused on getting what they wanted that they hadn't bothered to do their due diligence. They had assumed I was too old, too trusting, too foolish to know what was in the paperwork I'd signed. And that was their biggest mistake. "We need to talk to our lawyer," Jessica said, her voice a shrill whisper. She grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him toward the door. "We'll be back." "You do that," I said, a genuine smile on my face now. "And I'll be here, waiting. Because unlike you two, I have nowhere else to go. This is my home, and I'm not going anywhere." As they hurried out of the house, I walked to the door and locked it behind them. The silence that followed was a glorious, peaceful thing. I was still heartbroken by their betrayal, but I was also filled with a new resolve. They had tried to take everything from me, but they had failed. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a warrior. This is far from over. What my son and his wife found out when they talked to their lawyer will change the stakes of this fight forever. You won't want to miss how they try to retaliate. The game has just begun, and the next move is mine. Stay tuned to find out what happens next, and subscribe so you don't miss a single beat of this epic drama. I promise, the best is yet to come. They left in a fury of slammed doors and screeching tires, their confident strides replaced by a desperate, panicked scramble. I watched them go from my living room window, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips. The silence they left behind was the sweetest music I had heard in years. I walked back to my favorite armchair, the one my husband, Tom, had always sat in, and sank into its worn cushions. I took a deep, shaky breath, the reality of what had just happened finally catching up with me. The temporary victory had been sweet, but I knew it was just that, temporary. They wouldn't give up. Not a chance. Not Daniel, who had a hunger for money that I'd never seen before, and certainly not Jessica, who saw the world as a game to be won and the players as pawns to be used. They would go to their lawyer, and he would confirm what I already knew. A quitclaim deed signed by one person on a jointly owned property is legally questionable at best. It's like trying to bake a cake with only half the ingredients. You get a mess, not a dessert. But that wasn't the end of it.
The living trust was the real trump card, the document that truly protected my home. They would have to come back, but this time they would be armed with more than just arrogance. They would have a plan. I had a few hours before the storm returned. I used the time to my advantage. I wasn't going to just sit around and wait for them to make their next move. I was going to beat them to it. I grabbed my car keys, the ones that were still in my possession, and drove to the bank. I needed to see my financial advisor, Mr. Albright. He was an old family friend, a man with a kind smile and a mind like a steel trap. He had handled all of our finances since Tom passed, and I knew I could trust him. I walked into his office, and the moment he saw my face, his kind eyes clouded with concern. "Eleanor," he said, standing up and ushering me into a chair. "What is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse than a ghost, Bill," I said, my voice heavy with weariness. "My son and his wife just tried to kick me out of my own home." I told him everything about the visit, the slap, the quitclaim deed, and the lie about the living trust. As I spoke, I could see the anger in his eyes, a righteous fury on behalf of a friend he cared about. "That's absolutely despicable, Eleanor," he said when I was finished. "I'm so sorry. I know how much that house means to you. But I can't believe Daniel would do something like this. He's a good boy." "He was a good boy," I corrected him, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "But Jessica, she's changed him. She's turned him into a stranger, a cold, calculating stranger who would lie to his own mother to get a house he thinks he deserves." He was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the papers on his desk. "Well, you're not going to let them get away with this, are you?" "No," I said, a new resolve heartening my voice. "Absolutely not. I'm here because I need a plan. They're going to come back with a lawyer, and I need to be ready. I need to make sure I'm untouchable, and I need to make sure they know it." Mr. Albright smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "He think I can help with that," he said. "The Living Trust is a good start, but we can do more. We can set up a few more layers of protection, something that will not only secure your assets, but also send a message they won't forget." He pulled out a new stack of papers, his pen poised over the top one. "Eleanor, what I'm about to do is going to make it impossible for them to touch your assets. It's going to make them rethink their entire plan. Are you ready to play hardball?" I looked at the pen in his hand, then at the confident look on his face. The fear and exhaustion I'd felt a few hours ago were gone, replaced by a steely determination. They had tried to take my home. They had tried to take my dignity, but they had failed. Now it was my turn to show them what a real battle looks like. Just a heads up, this isn't the end of the story, not by a long shot. They thought they had me cornered, but with Mr. Albright's help, I'm about to turn the tables on them in a way they never saw coming. The stakes are about to get a lot higher, and you don't want to miss a second of it. So stay with me, and I'll show you what happens next. The best part is still to come.
Mr. Albright was a man of his word. We spent the next 2 hours going through my financial records, and he was a whirlwind of purpose, his pen flying across paper as he made notes and drew up a new strategy. He wasn't just my financial advisor, he was my accomplice in a war for my dignity. He laid out a plan to not only protect my assets from Daniel and Jessica, but also to use them as a weapon against their greed. He explained the nuances of irrevocable trusts, LLCs, and shell corporations, each one a new layer of armor, a new fortress built around my home and my savings. "This is the most important part, Eleanor," he said, tapping a finger on a document. "This is the what if scenario. We're going to put a clause in a new trust that specifically deals with undue influence and financial manipulation. It states that if anyone attempts to coerce you into giving up your property or money, their inheritance will be automatically and legally forfeited." My heart gave a little jump. The idea of cutting them off from my inheritance was both a painful thought and a thrilling one. It was a mother's last resort, a devastating blow to a child who had chosen greed over family. But they had forced my hand. They had made this about money, and now I was going to beat them at their own game. "And just to make things interesting," Mr. Albright added, a glint of mischief in his eye. "We're going to make sure they know about it. We'll send a certified letter to their lawyer outlining the new terms of your estate. It won't mention their names, of course, but it will be crystal clear. It's a shot across the bow, a clear warning that you are not to be trifled with." I felt a surge of adrenaline, a rush of power I hadn't felt in a long time. I was no longer a helpless victim. I was a strategist, a player in a high-stakes game. They had underestimated me, and now they were going to pay the price. I signed the papers with a steady hand, my signature a bold statement of defiance. When I got home, the house was still and quiet, but the silence felt different now. It was no longer the oppressive silence of a tomb. It was the calm before the storm, a peaceful moment of preparation. I made a cup of chamomile tea, a little ritual of mine, and sat on the front porch watching the sunset. I thought about Daniel, about the boy who used to build sandcastles with me at the beach, the teenager who brought home a stray puppy and insisted we keep it. Where did that boy go? Was he lost forever, consumed by his wife's ambition? The thought was a painful one, a persistent ache in my heart that no amount of legal maneuvering could ever heal. Suddenly, a car pulled up. It was Daniel and Jessica, their faces grim and defeated. They had obviously been to their lawyer, and the news had not been good. They looked like two kids who had just been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Daniel was the first to speak, his voice strained. "Mom, we need to talk." "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I replied, my voice as calm as the evening sky. "We had our talk this morning, and I think we both know how that went." Jessica's eyes were narrowed, full of venomous fury. "Our lawyer said you were right about the quitclaim deed, but he also said there are other ways to handle this. You won't be able to stay here forever, Eleanor. There are other legal avenues." I just smiled, a small, knowing smile that was meant to unnerve them. They had no idea. They had no idea about the new trusts, about the forfeiture clause. They were still playing checkers while I was moving chess pieces. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm willing to bet you'll find that my legal avenues are much more interesting than yours." I got up and walked into the house, leaving them standing there on the front lawn, their faces a mix of confusion and rage. I watched them from the window as they got back in their car and drove away, their brake lights a final angry punctuation mark on the end of a long, difficult day. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I had a chance to win. I wasn't just fighting for a house, I was fighting for my life, for my dignity, and for the memory of the woman I used to be. And I wasn't going to let them take that from me. You think you know what happens next? You don't. The next chapter will have a twist that nobody, not even I, saw coming. Get ready to have your expectations turned upside down. Stay with me and you'll find out the real truth behind this story and why everything is not as it seems.
The weeks that followed were a blur of legal maneuvering and cold, calculated silence. Daniel and Jessica tried to contact me multiple times, but I ignored their calls and texts. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let them back in my life just because their plan had backfired. They had chosen money over family, and they had to live with the consequences of that choice. They sent me a series of increasingly frantic emails, their tone shifting from demanding to pleading. They had obviously been to their lawyer, who had confirmed my claims about the quitclaim deed and the living trust, but they still hadn't given up. Their next move was a low blow, when I should have expected. They went to the media. Not the major news networks, of course. They went to the local news channels, the ones that loved a good human interest story. They painted a picture of a struggling young couple, a son who was just trying to do the right thing for his family, and a cruel, cold-hearted mother who was hoarding her wealth and denying them a chance at a life they deserved. They even had the audacity to bring up the slap, twisting the story to make it seem like I had attacked Jessica. They were trying to poison the well, to turn public opinion against me.
I watched the news report from my living room, my blood boiling. I saw Daniel's face, a mask of feigned sadness, and Jessica's, a picture of a distraught young woman. All we ever wanted was to start our own family, to have a home, Daniel said to the camera, his voice cracking with false emotion. But my mother, she's just not who we thought she was. She's turned her back on us. I was so angry I could barely breathe. They were painting me as a villain, a monster, to a community that had always known me as a kind, generous woman. They were using the very principles I had taught Daniel against me. They were using my good name as a weapon. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the power of truth. They had assumed that I, a woman in my 60s, wouldn't have the courage or the know-how to fight back. They were wrong. I picked up the phone and called my good friend Sarah. Sarah wasn't just my friend. She was a retired investigative journalist, a woman who knew how to dig for the truth and expose a lie. She said, "You saw the news report, didn't you, Eleanor? They're despicable. They're trying to ruin your reputation." "I know," I said, my voice tight, "and I'm not going to let them. I want you to expose them, Sarah. I want you to tell the real story. I want you to show the world who they really are. I want you to expose their lies, their manipulation, and their greed. I want to show them what a real battle for justice looks like." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure about this, Eleanor? This is going to get messy. It's going to be public, and it's going to hurt." "I'm sure," I said, a grim resolve settling over me. "It's already messy, it's already public, and it already hurts. But I'm not going to let them win. I'm going to fight for my dignity, for my home, and for the memory of the woman I was before they tried to destroy me." I sent Sarah all the documents, the emails, the texts, and a copy of the living trust. I sent her a detailed account of everything that had happened, from the slap to the media smear campaign. She went to work and I waited, a quiet storm of fury brewing inside me. The stage was set for the final showdown. They thought they had me cornered, but they had just given me a very public platform to tell my story, and I wasn't going to hold back. The truth is about to be revealed, and it's going to shake this whole town to its core. My son and his wife are about to learn a lesson they will never forget. Don't go anywhere. The next part will be the climax you've been waiting for. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned to see how the tables finally turn. Sarah was a force of nature. Within 48 hours, she had a camera crew at my house, and we sat down for an interview. I didn't hold back. I told the full story, from the moment Jessica slapped me to the legal maneuvering and the quitclaim deed. I showed her the certified letter we had sent, and I explained the living trust and the inheritance forfeiture clause. I was calm, clear, and methodical. I spoke not with anger, but with the quiet, dignified sadness. I was not a victim seeking revenge. I was a woman seeking justice. "My son, he used to be a good man," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "He was kind and he was honest. But my daughter-in-law's greed has twisted him into someone I don't even recognize. They didn't just try to take my house, they tried to take my dignity. They lied to the world and they lied to me, and I just couldn't stand by and let that happen." The interview was a hit. It aired on the local evening news, and the response was overwhelming. My phone started ringing off the hook. Friends, neighbors, even people I didn't know called to offer their support. They all saw through Daniel and Jessica's charade. They saw the truth. A GoFundMe page was set up by a stranger to help with my legal fees, and it was filled with donations almost instantly. The community was on my side, and the tables had turned. The public outcry was swift and brutal. Daniel and Jessica's social media accounts were flooded with angry messages. Their reputations, which they had so carefully crafted, were now in tatters. Their story of a struggling young couple was replaced by the reality of two greedy, manipulative people who had tried to steal from an elderly woman. They were vilified, ostracized, and shamed. Then came the phone call I was dreading. It was Daniel. His voice was no longer arrogant or condescending. It was desperate, pleading. "Mom, you gotta stop this," he said. "You're ruining us. We're getting death threats. Jessica was fired from a job. We can't go anywhere without people staring and whispering." "Did you ever stop to think about how you were ruining me?" I asked, my voice cold. "Did you ever stop to think about the pain you caused? You chose to go public with your lies, Daniel, and now you're facing the consequences of your actions." "We're sorry, Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "We made a mistake. Please, can we just go back to the way things were? We'll drop the whole thing. We'll leave you alone. Just please make it stop." "You want me to make it stop?" I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "I can't. The world has heard my story, and they've chosen a side. This isn't just about me anymore, Daniel. It's about every person who has ever been betrayed by the people they love, and I'm not going to let them down." He was quiet for a long moment, the silence thick with his defeat. "What do you want, Mom?" he finally said, his voice resigned. "What will it take for you to forgive us?" "Forgiveness isn't something you can buy or negotiate, Daniel. It's something you have to earn. And right now, you're a long, long way from earning it." I hung up the phone. I wasn't just fighting for my home anymore. I was fighting for my soul, for the last vestiges of my self-respect. They had tried to break me, but they had only made me stronger. I was a fighter, and I wasn't going to let them win. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the end of their story and the beginning of a new one for me. The final act is about to begin. The climax is here, and it will be bigger and more shocking than you can possibly imagine. This isn't just a win for me. It's a win for truth, for justice, and for every person who has ever been wronged. Don't you dare miss it.
The media attention was a double-edged sword. While it gave me the public support I needed, it also put my life under a microscope. Strangers would stop me in the grocery store to offer words of encouragement, and reporters would call at all hours of the day, hoping for a new scoop. But I stayed focused on the goal: my home, my dignity, and my peace of mind. The ultimate showdown came in the form of a court-ordered mediation. It was a last-ditch effort to settle things before a full-blown lawsuit. Daniel and Jessica were there with their lawyer, a slick man in a tailored suit who looked like he had never lost a case in his life. I was there with Mr. Albright, who was no longer just my financial advisor, but my steadfast ally in this war. The mediator, a kind but firm woman, began by laying out the terms. "We are here to find a mutually beneficial solution," she said. "Mrs. Vance, your son and daughter-in-law are prepared to drop all claims to the property if you agree to remove the inheritance forfeiture clause from your trust." I looked at Daniel and Jessica. Their faces were a mix of desperation and hope. They thought they had found a way out. They thought they could get their inheritance back without losing the house. They didn't understand that this was never about the house for me. It was about principle. It was about the fact that they had so callously tried to take everything from me. I looked at Mr. Albright, who gave me a slight, reassuring nod. I knew what to do. "I have a different proposal," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I will not remove the forfeiture clause, but I will do something else." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "What, you'll just give us the house?" she asked, a flicker of her old arrogance returning. "No," I said. "I'll do something far more valuable. I'll give you a chance to prove you're not the greedy, manipulative people you've shown yourself to be. The living trust stays as it is, but I will create a new trust, a charitable trust. All of my assets, including the house, will be placed in that trust upon my death.
The trust will be managed by a third party, and the funds will be used to create a foundation for mothers who have been betrayed by their own children. Daniel's face went pale. Jessica's jaw dropped. The lawyer's eyes widened in disbelief. They expected me to fight for my house, but they never expected me to give it away. They never expected me to turn my pain into a legacy. The foundation will provide legal and emotional support for women in my situation, I continued. It will be a place where they can find hope and where they can find justice. The foundation will be named after my late husband, Thomas Vance, a good man who would never have stood for this. The mediator looked at me, a look of profound respect in her eyes. Mrs. Vance, that is a truly generous and powerful gesture. Jessica's lawyer was the first to speak. But what about my clients? He stammered. They won't get anything. I looked at Daniel, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, a flicker of shame, of regret. I said, you had a chance at home. You had a chance at an inheritance. But you chose to lie, to betray, and to steal. You chose to try and destroy the very person who loved you the most. And now you have nothing. Nothing but the life you've created for yourselves. I hope it was worth it. I stood up and looked at Jessica. The slap you gave me was nothing compared to the pain you caused. But in a strange way, I'm glad you did it. It woke me up. It showed me the kind of people you are and gave me the strength to fight for myself. You didn't just try to take my house. You gave me a new purpose. And for that, I am truly, truly grateful. I turned and walked out of the room. The mediation was over. The battle was won. Not with anger or with revenge, but with dignity, with grace, and with a legacy that would help countless women who were facing the very same nightmare I had just survived. The final part of the story will reveal the aftermath of this shocking decision and how it not only changed my life, but also the lives of Daniel and Jessica forever. Stay tuned. The story is far from over, and the ending is something you'll never forget.
Walking out of that mediation room, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized was there. The legal battle was over, and I had won. But the victory wasn't just about the house. It was about reclaiming my life and my purpose. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I worked with Mr. Albright to finalize the details of the Thomas Vance Foundation, setting up a system for receiving donations and vetting applicants. The story of the foundation went viral, and the donations started pouring in from people all over the country who had been touched by my story. My house, my sanctuary, was now more than just a home. It was the headquarters of a movement. I converted the sunroom into a small office, and the dining room became a conference area. I hired a small team to help me manage the foundation, and soon we were helping our first clients. I was no longer a retired woman living alone. I was the CEO of a nonprofit, a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of hope for women who had been betrayed by the very people they loved. And what of Daniel and Jessica? Their lives were a different story. The public shaming was relentless. They were ostracized by their friends, and Daniel was demoted at his job. Jessica, who had been an aspiring influencer, lost all her brand partnerships and was forced to delete all her social media accounts. The life they had so carefully constructed, built on a foundation of greed and lies, had crumbled before their eyes. I heard from them one last time, a few months after the mediation. Daniel called me, his voice broken and full of remorse. "Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I'm so sorry. I don't even know who I am anymore. We lost everything. And it was all because of me." "It was because of your choices, Daniel," I corrected him gently. "You and Jessica made your choices, and now you have to live with them. I'm not a bank, Daniel. I'm your mother, and you can't just expect me to fix a mess you made." "I know," he said,
and I could hear the tears in his voice. I wanted you to know that I understand now, that you were right, and that I miss the way things used to be." I was quiet for a long moment. My heart ached for the boy he used to be, but the man he had become was a stranger. "The past is the past, Daniel," I said. "You can't go back, but you can learn from your mistakes. And maybe someday, you'll find your way back to the man you were supposed to be." I hung up the phone. I didn't hate them. I had moved on. The betrayal still hurt, but it no longer defined me. I had found a new purpose, a new family in the women I was helping through the foundation. They had tried to take everything from me, but in doing so, they had given me the greatest gift of all, a chance to start over, a chance to find a new path, a chance to show the world that even in the face of the darkest betrayal, kindness and justice can always triumph. My life was no longer about them. It was about me and about all the women who were just like me. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly, truly happy.